Our guest today is one of our favorite people. He's a dad, a teacher, an advocate, and the husband of a former presidential candidate. He's also the author of a memoir called I Have Something to Tell You, which was just adapted into a young adult edition. Chasten, I'm so excited to welcome you back to the Suburban Women Problem.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be back.
So we've been talking on the podcast lately about how we're just about to reach 100 episodes. I can't believe it. And we're doing a live event to celebrate with Heather Cox Richardson, who was our first guest. But you were actually our second guest. I talked to you back in May of 2021, and that was actually the first interview that I ever did on the podcast.
Wow.
So it's so nice to have you back.
Well, it's great to be back.
So much has changed since we talked in May of 21. We were still deep in the pandemic. Since then, I've been reelected. We've also seen bills that attack LGBTQ kids sweeping the country. And most importantly of all, you have become a parent.
That is true.
How have you been for the last 2 years? How's it been for you?
It's been a wild, wild ride. I started writing this book over 2 years ago, and then the kids were born. So threw a little wrench in there.
The kids do that sometimes.
Yeah. Keeping me very, very busy. And they're just remarkable. They're so cool. They're like my favorite people in the world. I want to be around them all the time. I just, never like you wear your heart on the outside of your chest, obviously DC is like a whole nother thing, political life, but dad life is just incredible. I love it so much.
So you just released a new version of your memoir for young adults.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, things have not gotten better for gay and trans kids in this country in the past 2 years. It just seems like if things could get worse, they just keep getting worse.
Yeah.
So could you tell our listeners more about your memoir and why you decided to adapt it to younger readers?
Yeah. So the goal of the book was to write something I wish I could have read when I was in middle school. It's also a book I really wish my teachers and my parents could have had. So they would have known the pain I was going through as a closeted gay teen in rural, northern, conservative Michigan. What I really needed, the allyship, the love I needed, the support I needed, and what that could have done for my confidence. So I detail a lot of those stories growing up and then go into teaching and obviously the presidential campaign a little bit. But this one is really for young people. And this is my way of helping them believe that it still can get better. I believe we're in this season of politics because things were actually getting better. And now because things were getting better, certain people are scared by that. So they want to make it worse.
Yeah, it's like a reaction, and it's really unfortunate. So I would love to hear one of the stories that you tell in your book.
Oh, sure. There's so much in there about conforming and identity and masculinity and politics and bullying. And there's some hard stuff in there, like heartbreaking stuff. I wanted to share like a really vulnerable side of myself with the young readers so they could sense what I went through. But then there's also some humor in there as well. So there's this whole chapter I love about not blending in on the playground and not knowing like who my friends were. And I wasn't good at track and I wasn't good at basketball and I wasn't, good at all these like athletic things. And it just kind of details like my parents setting me up for, the next thing, like join the basketball team. And like I failed miserably, like join the track and field team. And I failed miserably. And then there's a good chunk in there about growing up in 4-H and what it was like, raising cows. And the chapter's called I Am Not a Cowboy. And, this frightened, weird, lonely, closeted kid who's like wearing Wrangler jeans and like American flag shirts with a Stetson showing steers at the county fair. Like, what I really want to be doing is like singing Celine Dion on stage. There's a lot in there just about like identity and like what I thought everyone wanted me to be versus like what I, allowed myself to believe. And ultimately, when I leaned into my differences, how I, flourished and grew to love myself.
I love that. All right. So I think most of our listeners already support LGBTQ kids, but they're out there having conversations with their friends and neighbors about some of these issues. So For our listeners, do you have any advice about how they can talk to people in their lives about all these anti-trans and anti-gay bills? Because it's a lot.
Yeah.
And I think people are just kind of like, I don't know what to say.
Yeah, I think especially when it comes to trans Americans, if it's something that's really new to you, one of the most helpful things that you can do is to pause and then do your research. When I was traveling the country a couple of years ago on the campaign, I felt an expectation to speak up for everyone, not only speak up for everyone in our community, but to represent everyone in our community. And as a, white cisgender gay man, I walk through the world with different privileges than other people. I also have no idea what it's like to be trans. So for me, it was really important to sit down and learn from, young trans people, learn what was going on in the community, and learn how I could be a better ally. And there's a lot of information that I didn't have, and I had to go seek it out. There were connections that I needed to make, research I needed to do, and I needed to approach that with empathy. And because I believed in sticking up for people in our community, I wanted to do that work first. And so I think right now, something that folks can do is just take a breath and do some research. The wider American medical community supports gender affirming care. It is life-saving care. I would recommend people look to the science and the professionals in medicine, in mental health, in education, and learn before they react. There are also pockets of this country, especially in rural America, that don't have PFLAG chapters. So, you could start your own PFLAG chapter and join like-minded and similar parents who can, come together and meet and share that community, but also, the same purpose for sticking up for their kids. But I think it's a season of active allyship right now. The allyship has to be more than just posting on social media.
I love that. So one theme in your memoir is authenticity and, having the courage to be our true self no matter what. And so obviously that's like a super important message for young adults, but honestly is really important for all of us.
Yeah.
What lessons did you learn about authenticity in your formative years that have continued to be important to you even today as an adult?
Well, like I write in the book, I felt like being authentic was viewed as a sign of weakness. I thought that I was growing up in an environment that actually preferred that young men only look and act and behave in a very certain way. It didn't feel like there was a lot of room for stepping outside of the norm. It didn't feel like it was cool to be creative or funny. And sometimes I wondered whether I was being laughed with or laughed at because I was like the young theatrical geek, I was like on the bowling team and in theater and in 4-H, and I, didn't conform to a lot of the norms. And when I grew up, especially when I was out on the presidential campaign trail, I realized that all of these things that I had either grown up learning or something like to hide from other people, or I just felt internally that I shouldn't discuss. I found the more that I shared those with other people, the more people felt a connection to me, the more people saw themselves in me or in my story. And so I feel like the more vulnerable we are, the more we allow other people to connect with us. And so that's why I started opening up about the internalized homophobia I felt, my coming out story, the wonderful story of reconnecting with my parents after I ran away from home, and the power of that love and the goodness that could come from it, student debt. And certainly in the adult version of the book, I talked about my experience with, dating and sexual assault and why it's really important to share those stories if you're able, so that other people can feel less alone. So because I felt like I suppressed so much of my identity for so long and then leaned into it, I saw how much good could come out of living a more open and vulnerable but authentic life because other people could see themselves in it too.
I love all of that. I love that you mentioned people being able to see themselves, because I think a lot of times, especially when people are just trying to figure life out, they often feel alone.
Yeah.
They feel like they're the only one that's really going through this. And they wonder how everyone else seems to have it all together. And they're not understanding everything and they don't have everything put together. And so we talk a lot about book bans on this, on our show, because that is something that is happening across the country. And in particular, we talk a lot about how banning books does take away the ability for someone to maybe see themselves in a character in a book. And so I'm curious, do you have any concerns that your book could or would be banned by some of these, crazies out here that are kind of just free-for-alling it when it comes to banning books that do deal with some of the issues that you probably talk about?
Yeah, I mean, I'm under no illusion of, what we're dealing with here. And I certainly didn't think that this would be the, national landscape when I started writing the book 2 years ago. I also think it would just be politics if my book were banned. I wrote a completely age-appropriate book. I used to be a teacher. I knew my audience. I used to teach middle school. So I think if it is banned, then it's just politics, because then it's just, silencing the voice of gay authors, or just the existence of a story about a gay person is the thing that they're really upset about. And I also will just say, like, as a parent, as a teacher, I would never put my kids in a position where they would be, confronted with something age inappropriate. As an author, as a teacher, as a parent, I would never write something I think is age inappropriate. And I think the conversation about like parents' rights and what's appropriate for kids is sort of being weaponized to make it sound like there's a problem that exists when it really doesn't.
Yeah.
Because this, they threw everything at the wall and they saw what's stuck, and what's sticking is LGBTQ people again.
Yeah.
And so they infuse a lot of fear and confusion into something that, isn't happening right now.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think a lot of it is just they had to choose their boogeyman of the year, and that ended up being LGBTQ children of all people, and so many of the things that they're doing. But, to your point, your book is going to be, it's just telling your story to an audience in an age appropriate manner. However, I've seen people try to ban books about two penguins that happen to be the same sex raising an egg. Yeah. So I feel like if people want to be outraged, they can find anything to be outraged about. And that's really unfortunate because the people who suffer the most are the people who just want to learn, or the people who want to see themselves in a character, or maybe the kid that's still trying to figure life out. And, maybe they resonate with some of the stories that you tell in your memoir.
Books like the Penguin book, that's just like erasing the existence of LGBTQ families.
Exactly.
Right. Or just different families. Like some people have, two dads. Some people have two moms. Some people live with their grandma. Some people have a solo parent. Some people live with 4 different adults, on a rotating basis. Like all families look different. And so that one is really silly to me because it's just erasing the existence of, a same-sex couple. The thing about the bans that is so silly to me is like, they say it's not about gay people, it's just about age appropriate content. But I don't know about you, but when I was in middle school, I read this story about like a 14 and 15, like 2 teenagers, 14, 15 years old, who fell in love with one another in one day, got married, may or may not have consummated that marriage off stage, and then killed themselves out of love. Do you remember Romeo and Juliet?
Oh, yeah. I think we all had to read that. Yes.
Nobody was out in the streets protesting, that story. That was completely age appropriate for us to learn, amongst a litany of other stories, also because we trusted parents and we trusted teachers to make educated decisions and to teach content that they thought was appropriate to children, and to be able to have the conversations around that kind of content. Now you see the introduction of more stories, including LGBTQ characters of color, and that bothers them. And the question is, why does it?
Yeah. Why now? Like, why out of all the things, why is this so concerning to you? And like you said, we literally read about teen suicide when we were younger.
Right. And when they say that it's not, it's not about the existence of gay people, it's just age appropriate content, I call bologna sandwiches, because we read many things when we were kids, Lord of the Flies.
Yes.
And nobody had a problem with that. So if they want to re-examine literature, then there's going to be a lot of stories with straight characters that would, based on the rules that they, are putting out, that would need to be, revoked as well.
Agree. Well, all right. It's been such a joy to have you back on the pod. So as you probably remember from before, we like to ask our guests a few rapid fire questions before we go.
Okay.
So you ready? All right.
Alrighty.
Here we go.
Uh-oh.
All right.
Okay.
So the last time you were on the pod, we talked about how excited you were for Broadway to open back up. So what's been your favorite Broadway show of the past 2 years?
Oh my goodness. I got to take my parents to Wicked when it came to the Kennedy Center at Christmas time.
I saw Wicked too.
And my dad had never seen a musical in his life. And it was just incredible to share that with him. I love that theater is reopening. I just saw Ben Platt in Parade, which was incredible. Sean Hayes in Goodnight Oscar was incredible. Yeah.
I love it. Wicked actually was the first Broadway show that I ever saw. After you and I talked, I actually got a chance to go
It's great.
to New York, and Wicked was what I saw.
Lovely.
So next question. What is your go-to Starbucks order?
Ooh, I'm all over the place. Usually I'm just like an iced coffee with a dash of cream kind of person. Every now and then I like green tea latte.
I love it. I'm a green tea person. So
I just learned how much sugar is in the coffee frappuccino though. I used to be like, I don't get any of the sugary ones. I just get the plain coffee frappuccino. That thing's got like 40 grams of sugar in it. I didn't know all this time. But normally I'm just a iced coffee all year round.
I like it. All right. So what's been the best part about becoming a dad?
Oh man, they have this incredible way of reminding you how beautiful the world is. Like Gus is obsessed with birds right now. And this morning I was getting him out of the stroller and putting him in his car seat. And he stopped and he was looking around. There were like birds in the trees, like birds on the pavement, birds in the bushes. And he's like, bird, bird, bird. And like the wonder in his eyes. And it's every day, right? They're just fascinated by the world. They point out all the fire trucks and the buses and the trucks. And when the world just seems so overwhelming, I love pausing and trying to be very present with them because they really pull you back down to earth very quickly.
I love that.
Because they're just enjoying the existence of birds,
Yeah.
when you're like wrapped up in what's happening online or in politics.
I love that. I know. I miss that. My kids are teenagers now, so they are not as excited to see birds, but it's a whole different adventure, but I totally know what you mean when they're just discovering the world and the things that you pass right by. They're like, that thing is amazing. Yeah. And you're like, actually, you're right. It is kind of amazing.
We can walk around the neighborhood and it'll take like an hour because we have to stop, everything and look at it and inspect it. It's so cool.
And look at every little flower, dandelion. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
All right. So some pretty amazing people have praised your memoir. Who were you the most starstruck to get a quote from about your book?
Oh, man. I mean, obviously very grateful that so many people had nice things to say about the book. Growing up, I didn't really know a lot of gay people. And then Ellen DeGeneres came on TV. And Ellen was sort of like a hint to me that it could be possible because my mom really liked watching her show and she laughed at it. And like, maybe, things will get better. And so the fact that like I grew up and wrote a story in which, Ellen appreciated and, wanted to blurb was really touching.
I love that. Awesome. All right. So last question. This is kind of a hard one, but I think a good one. What gives you hope?
Oh, well, my kids, because I know what my mission is. I know what I'm working toward. And even when there's dread, there's still hope because I want to leave them a better world. I want to leave them with things that I'm proud of. Writing this book, it gave me so much purpose to leave something behind that hopefully they'll be proud of one day. And the fact that there are really good people out there doing good work. And so when you're overwhelmed with social media and it just seems like everything is dreadful, just remember that there's so many good people out there who aren't getting the attention they deserve.
Right.
And I certainly know them here in Washington. No one wants to talk about what they're doing because it's not flashy, but there are so many good people in this world who I know also want those things for my kids too.
I love that. All right. So that is the end of our rapid fire questions. You did a great job.
Thank you.
All right. So where can people go to find out more about you and your book?
Thank you. Folks can visit chastenwrites.com. And you can order a book there. You can learn a little bit more about it. You can also donate a copy on the website to nonprofit LGBTQ centers. We're going to try to make sure the book gets in the hands of young people who need it the most, as well as teachers and other nonprofit centers. So Chasten writes, WRITES.com.
I love it. So nice talking to you again, Chasten. Thanks for coming back to the Suburban Women Problem.
Thanks for having me.
I have something to tell you for young adults. Goes on sale May 16th and is available now for pre-order. Tickets for Chasten's in-person National Book Tour are also available at chastenwrites.com.